Hey everyone, welcome back to all my listeners. This is episode 16 of season 10. Today is Wednesday, December 20th, 2023. My name is Sonal Patel, and this is the Paint the Medical Picture podcast series. All right, you guys, welcome. Today's Newsworthy features a brand new place of service code, 27. And in my Trusty Tip, I wanted to go over the 2024 Split Shared Services Guidelines in the CPT Code Manual. And I'm going to go ahead and round out and close out today's episode with a remarkable quote on perseverance by Harriet Beecher Stowe. This episode is sponsored by Utilization Management University. Let's get into it. Whether you are involved in the business of healthcare or any other business, what do you, your teams, and your management concentrate on the most? Typically, they communicate, problem solve, and make strategic decisions that drive the success of the organization. But how much time is actually spent in making tomorrow better than today? Are they striving for operational excellence? Prevention versus correction is a concept that's been known for years. So why do so many companies not implement the process? Utilization Management University provides a course that proves to be a unique solution to instill change in the mindset of business teams. This course provides the theory and the practical approach. This course will demonstrate how to implement a simple methodology as a solution. This course provides a detailed explanation of each and every step involved in prioritizing your problems and finding the root cause. This course shows how to engage team buy-in. This course readily provides available support for any issues. And the course provides the theory and helps you adapt it to your own individual circumstances. Check out the details at www.utilizationmanagementuniversity.com today and get registered. Utilization Management University, making tomorrow better. So let's get into Newsworthy. There's a brand new place of service, POS code, number 27, which will be implemented on January 2nd, 2024. Place of service 27 is defined as outreach site, street, and is for, quote, a non-permanent location on the street or found environment not described by any other place of service code, where health professionals provide preventive, screening, diagnostic, and or treatment services to unsheltered homeless individuals, end quote. The Medicare Administrative Contractors, the MACs, are instructed to adhere to this technical direction provided by CMS. This is not a change to the MAC's statement of work. And now, it's time for my best practice tips in Trusty Tip. There's a new CPT guideline for split or shared services in the 2024 CPT Code Manual. Now, these guidelines will look familiar to you if you're used to reading Medicare guidelines on split or shared services. These are only applicable in the inpatient setting. They are not pertinent to office or other outpatient services. So in 2024, in the green text, CPT expanded their definition of split shared in 2024, stating that the substantive portion can be determined by the practitioner who spent more than 50% of the time, or who made or approved the medical decision making. Now, CMS will allow the substantive portion to be determined based on the practitioner who spent more than 50% of the time, or the practitioner who performs the medical decision making, the MDM. Now, that practitioner needs to be documenting the history or examination. All of that is still considered best practice, in my opinion, but they will not count that documentation of history or that documentation of exam towards the substantive portion. Now, CMS also says when the work is shared, quote, that CMS expects that whoever performs the MDM and subsequently bills the visit would appropriately document the MDM in the medical record to support billing of the visit, end quote. Now, I completely agree with this in my opinion as well. I do consider that to be best practice when I am auditing documentation. I also look at auditing documentation from a payer standpoint. So I like to provide guidance to my providers that best practices do include that whoever is performing and then subsequently billing that substantive portion, they should be appropriately documenting the MDM in the medical record. Now, those services may include both face-to-face as well as non-face-to-face activities. Services billed using the physician's NPI are obviously paid at a higher rate than those billed by a non-physician practitioner. Now, again, for Medicare purposes, shared services may only be done, like I said earlier, in a facility setting, again, in the inpatient space. Shared services may not be performed in place of service 11, again, in the office or other outpatient settings for Medicare patients. CMS does note that there is an incident to benefit for the non-facility setting. Again, those incident to constructs are definitely Medicare only. So be mindful and review your commercial payer policies. They may have something similar in construct to incident to. Now, of course, CPT is silent about what location to be billing with when you're doing split shared. Now, Medicare requires HCPCS modifier F as in Frank, S as in Sam for split or shared evaluation and management services to identify what is being shared. So again, that F as in Frank, S as in Sam modifier is appended to the E&M service where the billing practitioner is performing the substantive portion. So again, CMS is able to track using that modifier FS. Now, if you're using MDM to determine the substantive portion, this is what CPT has to say in 2024 in the new green text. Quote, performance of a substantive part of the MDM requires that the physician or other QHP made or approved the management plan for the number and complexity of problems addressed at the encounter and takes responsibility for that plan with its inherent risk of complications and or morbidity or mortality of patient management. By doing so, a physician or other QHP has performed two of the three elements used in the selection of the code level based on MDM, end quote. So what you can glean from their new green text is that if the provider is performing the number and complexity of problems addressed, as well as that risk of complications to patient management, that provider is then taking on the substantive portion. So 2 out of those 3 columns that meet the MDM level can be documented by that subsequent billing provider then, right? So they will be documenting what work they're performing to meet the substantive portion definition that they've now included in the new green text. Now, CPT also adds a distinction between the 3 elements, right? So if that number and complexity of problems and risk are used to select the level of service, the encounter can be reported by the practitioner who, quote, takes responsibility for that plan, end quote. So make sure that the provider who's taking responsibility is not just repeating what perhaps the APP has documented in the number and complexity of problems addressed, as well as the risk. We have to make sure that that MD provider is taking on the responsibility for that plan. So that has to be well documented for an auditor like myself, and even greater importance for a payer auditor to understand what the MD is taking on afterwards, right? They're taking full responsibility for that patient's plan of care after this particular split shared visit. Now, if the amount and or complexity of data to be reviewed and analyzed is used by the physician or other QHP to determine the reported code level, assessing an independent historian's narrative and the ordering or review of tests or documents do not have to be personally performed by the physician or other QHP. because the relevant items would be considered in formulating the management plan. Independent interpretation of tests and discussion of management plan or test interpretation must be personally performed by the physician or other QHP if these are used to determine the reported code level by the physician or other QHP, end quote. So when the substantive portion is going to be utilized by that second column in our MDM table, that column for data analyzed, if that's going to be used to document the substantive portion, the provider has to be independently interpreting any tests and discussing the management plan or test interpretations, right? All of those things must be personally performed by that physician or that other QHP, that APP, who is going to be documenting as well as then billing out what is to be considered the substantive portion for split shared. So if the data portion is one of the elements in selecting the level of service, and there is that independent interpretation or discussion of management or test results with another healthcare professional that's being used again to select the level of E&M code, those activities must be done by the billing clinician, right, to support the substantive portion. So again, it's more complicated, in my opinion, to use that second column for the data analyzed. But again, they do explain quite clearly in the green text how to do that for the data portion. It has to be only that section for the moderate or high levels of MDM according to the chart, right? Because we have to include those independent interpretations of tests as well as that higher level of discussion with another qualified healthcare professional in the management plan for that patient. Now, CMS continues to say, however, that there's been a delay, right? Once again, we've seen this year after year. It could be the second or third year now that they've pushed off the time-only substantive requirements. So for 2024, we're still looking at using the MDM. So best practices are definitely to develop or enhance your current internal policies, right, on split shared visits at your organization, and use it wisely until the next set of changes or revisions are issued by CPT or by CMS. And finally, I focus Season 10 Spark on perseverance. I want this 10th season Spark to be filled with our world's thought leaders, writers, artists, philosophers, everyone who inspires the need for perseverance in all we strive to do. So, in this week's inspiring quote, in Spark, is from Harriet Beecher Stowe. When you get into a tight place and everything goes against you, never give up then, for that is just the place and time that the tide will turn. Absolutely true, right? This quote reminds us that the tide will always turn. This quote reminds us that we will encounter many difficult times. This quote encourages us to never give up, encourages us to stay our ground and persevere, because there will be a time and a place for everything to align. I'm happy Harriet Beecher Stowe's spark still burns brightly in all of us today. So that wraps up today's episode, and as always, I appreciate you all diving into today with me. If you want more information from me, please go ahead and follow me on LinkedIn. I'll leave links to everything in the show notes below. So in my final note today, I wanted to wish all my listeners near and far a very, very happy Christmas. I hope you're all looking forward to a joyous holiday filled with love and family, friends and fun, good cheer and food, and abundance. Wishing you all an amazing and very, very happy week ahead. Thank you guys so much for listening on today's episode, and I hope every week with me brings you closer to helping your providers paint a masterpiece. See you next Wednesday.